This is a continuation of my Uncle Jim tribute, going back to the boat trip depicted on that same boat trip. I'm thinking we were like, around a country store or something like that. I mean, eventually. And I noticed outside of that country store was one of them external drive condensing units. And probably to maybe keep the refrigeration system to the store cool. I guess that's what it was, but I mean, way back in the day, in medieval times, I mean, they did actually make, condensing units for store with external drive, compressors. And I went up to that condensing unit, and that, of course, the motor and the shaft, the end of the shaft had a fan blade to it. Of course, there was a condenser, and that fan blade behind it, which I thought was really cool. And of course, I mean, it was built into a pulley, which would, power the compressor. And so I looked, it wasn't turned on at the time, but I just looked it over, and I guess I just wanted to just stare it down. And some short time later, when we were near that area, I mean, I heard that condensing unit was turned on, making, that loud, distinctive, piston racket. And in a bench nearby, there was a man sitting down in sunglasses, and he looked like he was relaxing nearby when apparently, I mean, the condensing unit was on, making that loud racket. And I mean, that's a fond memory I have. And also, I mean, during one of, the increments of the trip, we stopped at, we docked the boat and ate at a bar, and a nearby harbor, there was, one of them tiller boats, one of them old-fashioned boats where smaller boats with a tiller that you steer the, engine to navigate the boat. And I saw the controls there on the, the outboard, tiller more. And it looked like there was, this lever and also these buttons of all other sorts. And I thought at the time, maybe them buttons are to turn that, outboard motor on and off. And, just thought they were all controls just to, I guess, to turn the motor on and off, which really, I mean, it may have been throttle controls, and may have been some kind of throttle controls, and maybe had something to do with the motor mechanism. Who knows? But I saw them unique buttons on that outboard motor. Then we walked in a bar and sat, and they got us some lunch. I'm thinking we were sitting at the bar, and and they gave me my meal, and there was a cheeseburger, and it was cut in half. And I'm thinking, recalling that, I'm thinking, didn't my dad know at the time that I hated cheese? I've always hated cheese, and I hated cheese back then too, but I mean, there was a cheeseburger cut in half. I'm guessing they may have got to me a different burger or maybe took the cheese off. I don't know, but I wasn't very impressed with that halved, cheeseburger. And like above us where we were sitting, there was this exhaust fan with just this a wire mesh. Of course, the exhaust fan had a louver and it was turned on. And more than likely it served as ventilation for the bar back in the days. This was back in the days when a lot of places didn't have air conditioning yet, and I take it that exhaust fan above us was used to, well, cool the bar and exhaust the air out. And thought, that fan going above us was pretty unique. And me being a little boy, I thought maybe the fan was crying. And I asked Dad, is that fan crying? He goes, no, it's not crying. But anyway, just me as a little boy, of course, I was just thought that exhaust fan, well, very unique. And there was this day where we, I guess we docked the boat and, walked up on this town strip. Well, no, actually, we docked the boat and, I guess near where Uncle Jim's car was parked and cruised around in the car for a while, if my memory is jogging right. And I guess Dad may have been walking the strip, or something like that, and with Jenica and, well, Jim's sons, my cousins, something like that. And me and Jim were riding in the car alone, and there in the plaza on one of them, store outlets, above, well, I guess the facade, there was this window air conditioner. And back then, most window air conditioners, you can't see the condenser fan because the condenser fan blade is behind the condenser. But back in the day, they made some of the units where I guess the condenser fan was beside the condenser and it was visible from the outside. And I noticed that unit, and as me and Jim were cruising by, I stared it down, and Jim kept on saying to me, hey Sam, where's your dad? Do you see your dad? Look around, do you see your dad? Do you see your dad now? And he kept on asking me, do I see my dad? And I'm thinking to myself, and I guess I was kind of frustrated because he was disturbing my concentration of me focusing on that condenser fan of that window unit. That's another, well, funny, nostalgic moment. And then we actually, found Dad, parked the car, and we all ate at, a bar then too, and, kind of this walk-in restaurant or something like that, and sat at the bar, and I remember another exhaust fan there in the doorway that, I was staring down. Of course, it had grates around it, but wasn't turned on. Another fascination. And at the time, all along, it was a good boat trip. And at the time, we lived in Illinois, until 1983, my Uncle Jim actually, had dark brunette hair. In late 1987, my grandma Reedy got killed in a car wreck, and we all traveled to Illinois for Grandma Reedy's funeral, and first met at my Aunt Pat and Uncle Daryl's home back then. And And then, of course, I mean, we like, you know, corresponded with everybody there. And then, you know, my Uncle Jim came up to me and held out his hand for me to shake and says, "Hi, Sam, how are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing fine." And I asked him, "Who are you?" And he goes, "I'm your Uncle Jim." And the fact is I did not recognize Uncle Jim right off, because what had happened is his hair was almost solid gray. I mean, keep in mind, I mean, we lived in Illinois until 1983, and then saw Uncle Jim again for the first time in that 4 years in 1987. So I mean, Uncle Jim like turned gray very rapidly, and recalling that, I was thinking, if I were to turn gray, I hope I don't, like, you know, turn gray all of a sudden like that. Of course, I have a few gray hairs, just here and there, not too bad yet. But I had fun, well, mingling with Uncle Jim like I did everybody else. And too, what was really neat about, well, the funeral trip was Jim and Sue stayed in, I think, like, you know, this cabin or something like that, and may have been just their stay for Grandma Reedy's funeral, I guess, anyway. It was a pretty neat cabin, or, you know, whatever you would call it. Just a neat, well, country-looking home. So, I mean, remember the living area, well, the kitchen, and the living room, and the living room had, like, you know, this, like, you know, like miniature furnace as a heater. And of course, I mean, and there was a fan on back of the furnace blowing the heated air to the living room. And of course, and so, of course, I mean, it was always turned on to keep that living room warm. One night at that, you know, home, well, some of the family met there in the living room, and then I, like, you know, walk in there. Of course, it was like I think it may have been the laundry room, and then that living room, and of course a heating unit to the living room with a fan to it. And then Uncle Jim comes in that room to unplug the unit. It was, I guess it just had a cord, and he came in to unplug it, and, you know, and of course, and it was, the fan was like deception. I mean, the light made it look like it was, like, you know, turning a particular direction, and I was convinced that it was spinning that direction. But whenever Uncle Jim, like, you know, unplugged the unit and the fan coasted down, of course it coasted down in the totally opposite direction. And of course, that was neat, and kind of walked over to it, and Uncle Jim looked at me and said, "Don't get into anything in here, Sam." And of course, I just walked out to the living room and kind of, like, you know, sat with everybody, which was really cool. What I also recall of that trip is we found in Grandma Reedy's, you know, possessions this big straw hat with this surrounding flat bill, or whatever you call it. And Jake, Uncle Jim's youngest son, my cousin, got a hold of that hat and played around with it. And then Uncle Jim said, "Jake, do not mess with Grandma's stuff." And of course, I mean, just all from what I recall, a good trip, except for my Mama Reedy, of course, dying. I mean, that sucked, but I did enjoy mingling with everybody, including Uncle Jim. Well, whenever we went back to, like, Illinois, it's just me and Dad to round up, well, the rest of the possessions, pendants, what have you. I'm thinking, me and Dad met at Aunt Pat's house and, like, overnighted at, like, Aunt Pat and Uncle Daryl's home, and Uncle Jim stayed with us there, and of course, in the long run, we end up going to this facility that housed, well, all of Grandma Reedy's possessions, pendants, but of course, there was a night or two we all, like, just, well, had kind of family fun there in Aunt Pat and Uncle Daryl's living room. And their kitchen was, like, right beside, right beside the living room. I remember the kitchen, the preparation area, the dining area, and the living room. I remember now, I mean, well, Jim's boy, Jason, my cousin, was also there, I think. Yeah, he was there. And also, oh yeah, Uncle Dick was there too. Yeah, Uncle Dick. I mean, my memory is being triggered right now. And also Dick's son, Matt, my cousin Matt. What I remember the best is one night, I mean, me, Uncle Jim, and Matt were, like, sitting there at, like, the table, and Uncle Jim was like a smoker, and I can't say anything about that. Hell, I still vape, so I can't really, like, scold Uncle Jim for being a smoker. But I don't know if Uncle Jim, like, continued to smoke in his latter years, but back then, for sure, he was a smoker, and of course, and I mean, I was sitting there, and Uncle Jim was, like, there smoking, and there was the ashtray, and he was, like, sitting there giving Matt a hard time about something, just conversing with Matt, giving him guff about whatever, and Matt and Jim having, like, laughter with one another, with Jim being the conqueror, giving Matt the hard time, having a grand old time. And of course, and as Uncle Jim sat down the cigarettes, of course, I think I kind of played around with the ashtray or something, and then Uncle Jim said, "Now, Sam, don't mess around with the ashtray, okay?" And Uncle Jim, I mean, spent a lot of his life living in Illinois, but in his latter years, I mean, he, like, relocated all the way to Texas, and lived in, Texas, I think, yeah, for I don't know how many years, of course, until his death of health complications recently, and I can't, specify what all he did for a living right off, but I think he may have, worked for restaurants, and also, and at the end of his days, I mean, he was, like, an employee working at Lowe's department store and all that, and, just, but, it was good, I mean, to, converse with him back when I was on Facebook as well. Even though I haven't seen Jim since, like, medieval times, so to speak. he still plays a good role in my nostalgia, and I feel the longing for this nostalgia to carry on. So I just got right up and made these, long ass tributes, and hope you enjoyed and have a good weekend.